The reality is, for me, and I suspect everybody else, and this goes back to the Greek philosophers, material things, winning, gives you short-term happiness and pleasure. The thing that actually gives you the long-term pleasure is altruism, is having a purpose, a reason for being. And it is all about finding that in your career and your life, that what you're doing is working with great people, helping great people, supporting great people be better, helping a business be stronger. It's that you get contentment from. And it took me, quite a few years to work that out. So my one lesson is you'll get the greatest pleasure, not from growing your business and selling it for 20 million, and then thinking that, that beach holiday and that yacht is going to be it for you.
Mark, you are very welcome to the ScaleX Insider Podcast. Delighted and thrilled to have you on the show today.
It's my great pleasure, Brendan. I'm really looking forward to chatting with you.
Likewise, I have read your wonderful work and it's something we will promote amongst our entire community. I always kick off the show with this question, Mark. Our vision is to inspire, connect, and enable millions of ambitious leaders of small to medium-sized enterprises to scale with purpose. So, Mark, what does scaling with purpose mean to you?
Well, for me, it's really important because it's the foundation of everything we're trying to do at WorkL and everything I'm trying to do in my books. And it comes back really to the first day I joined John Lewis and Waitrose as a graduate trainee many years ago. It must be, 40 odd years ago now. And I was told on that first day that the supreme purpose of the organization was the happiness of the people that worked there. And the founder had this great idea. He thought that if people are happy at work, they'll stay longer, work harder, have less sick absence. And I was able to spend an awful lot of time in that business, 34 years, and at business schools, really thinking about what drives happiness at work and does it have a commercial advantage. And so the purpose that drives me, the purpose that drives WorkL, is helping people to understand how happy they are at work, measuring it and improving it so that it drives commercial performance. It's good for the individual, it's good for organizations, and it's good for society. So for me, the purpose is about what are you doing to create a better world, a happier world? What are you doing to make a difference? And if you can find that in your work, it's a really powerful thing.
Oh, here. We're absolutely aligned there, Mark. You've touched on an incredible career, and I feel your leader at that point in time to talk about a supreme purpose like 34 years ago, he was way ahead of his time, because certainly purpose is something I feel has only really come into the business lexicon in the last 5, maybe 10 years, certainly socialized by Simon Sinek's wonderful work, Start With Why. But what is it about your career, and it's an incredible career, that has given you this wonderful insight as to why happy workplaces are much more successful in the context of enabling scaling?
Simply because through practice, I got to understand what happens if you have a business where people are happy and engaged and give more. They give extra discretionary effort, and how that drives commercial performance. So the place that it really hit home to me was when I was running Waitrose supermarkets, and we started to buy supermarkets from our competitors. And the supermarkets that we bought would have 70% staff turnover. They'd had sick absence of 20%. And it was really costing those businesses. But when Waitrose took them over and we applied this thinking, which has been in the business now for 100 years, what happened is that the sick absence dropped to 4%, 5%, and the staff turnover dropped to 20%. And of course, what became apparent is there is a huge commercial advantage in that. If you're going out and you're recruiting 70% of your workforce every year, you've got the cost of recruitment, the cost of training, and the cost of lost productivity. Well, imagine not having those and being at 20%, not 70%. It's a huge saving. And then imagine covering sick absence for a fifth of your workforce, 20% of your workforce absent, as opposed to it being 4%. And you can work then with fewer people because you're having to cover fewer people who are away sick. And so what I was able to work out was that there is a real cost in making sure that you recruit the right people who are going to be the right fit for your business, that then you develop them, that they're happy in their work, and then you get the commercial advantage. So for me, if you're going to scale a business, as I'm scaling WorkL now into a global tech business, then what you want to do is recruit people who are going to stick with you for the journey. You don't want to be hiring new people every 3 months, 5 months, 6 months, because you're losing them. You want people who understand the mission, what you're trying to do, stick with you, and then it's much easier to scale and grow.
Those statistics are really, really profound, and we're going to dig deeper into those in terms of understanding and uncovering the antidote to that. You mentioned, the journey that you've been on, or touched on the journey that you've been on, or were on in Waitrose, now on in WorkL, in the context of scaling Waitrose at the time. And scaling, again, is only a word that's come into the business lexicon in the last 10 to 15 years. So it wouldn't have been a thing when you were the MD back in 2007, similar to myself in CD at the time. But what are some of the key decisions you feel now, when you reflect back on that journey, that really enabled you guys to scale in what was a very, very, and still is a very, very competitive retail environment?
So if you put capital to one side, actually having the money to be able to afford to do it, so let's take for granted you've got the money, you can do it. The biggest issue that we had, the biggest challenge we had at Waitrose, was thinking about to what extent can we replicate the culture that we have now that's made us successful if we are to take on new businesses and if we are to grow as quickly as we wanted to. What we knew is we had a great formula. What we knew is that customers really love Waitrose. They love shopping at Waitrose. But the reason that we had only grown organically by 1 or 2 shops a year is that our thinking was, because we spend so much time training and developing people, because they get into the culture of our business and understanding it, it's that delivers great customer service. We can't simply go out and buy competitor shops or take on tranches of shops elsewhere, because what will happen is we'll inherit those people. Those people won't have the same values, they won't have the same training. As a consequence, what will happen is we'll dilute our ability to grow, we'll dilute our service, and our name will be diminished, and therefore this won't help the brand. And so we were constrained by this thinking about, it's all about the people. How do we make sure the new people are as good as the people we've got in the business? And it was that really held us back for a very long time. Then we decided that actually the opportunities in the UK were too great. Lots of supermarkets were divesting of shops. We wanted to grow. And so we took this risk. We said to ourselves, okay, look, we are going to take on these shops under TUPE, so the legal arrangements in the UK. You have to take on the people of the business that you're buying. So what we said is, right, we'll take them on, we'll take a risk, we'll train them, we'll develop them, we'll put our managers in, we'll send the managers we inherit to our existing shops to be trained, and we'll see what happens. And at the time, I'd done lots of work at business schools about our model, and I know we'll come on to talk about that, but the things that you do to make sure people are happy at work. So we implemented that. And as I said earlier, what we saw when we took that on is within 3 months, we had massive cultural change. I can remember one shop that we opened, the night before opening, somebody graffitied in the loos in the shop. And the branch manager got a painter and decorator to come and paint them. And the next morning, he put a note in the dining room saying, look, I got this person in. It costs 200 quid to have the loos repainted overnight. That's £200 less that we're going to have to share amongst ourselves as a successful business. And there was a cashier who phoned in sick, and her colleague went to see the manager, and she said, Mary's not sick. She's gone to see her sister in Brighton, but I don't think that's fair. I don't think it's right that she's now left us on the loop. And it was those things that made a real difference. People feeling that they owned the business, they had a stake in the business, people feeling that their colleagues were shirking and that wasn't fair. And so as a consequence of that, what happened is staff turnover dropped, sick absence dropped, productivity improved, customer service improved, and sales went through the roof. So For me, the biggest challenge that we had in scaling was making sure you get the right people and those people perform. And as I say, after decades of growing organically by one or two shops, we were brave enough to say, actually, we understand our culture well enough, we understand how to implement it well enough that we can do this at scale. And so effectively, we doubled the size of the business in 9 years.
Absolutely incredible. And this is a limiting belief which comes up certainly through our program that those SME leaders have in relation to scaling through acquisition. This fear that they won't be able to replicate the culture that has taken them years to build organically. So you've called that out as a limiting belief, and you've teased our listeners with the formula for scaling by leveraging great people, which is, of course, the third principle of our 10 principles ScaleX framework. You've spoken to the first, which is psyche, which is really calling out limiting beliefs. And you've referenced also the 10th one, positive growth culture. Your book, for those who are listening, you won't be able to see the book that I'm holding up now by Lord Mark Price, Happy Economics, Why the Happiest Workplaces Are the Most Successful. And I encourage you all to go out and get a copy, because I love this book in its practicality. It's so instructive, and there's lots of tactical actions that you can implement immediately upon reading the book. Mark, what I'd love to do today is a little mini masterclass on those steps which we can all implement to ensuring that our workplace becomes a happier workplace, and by virtue of it being a happier workplace, what we're going to say here, the correlative impact of this is that we become more successful in the context of scaling. And I think, just to call out, in the latest Gallup survey, it says that 80% of people in workplaces currently are actually disengaged. So this isn't something that's abstract, something that, you say, oh, here Brendan goes again with his happy workplaces and positive growth culture mantra. This is practical action, practical guidance, practical advice through someone who has lived this, who now has made it his entire career, and has taken the time to share with you, our listeners. So, Mark, what are the 6 steps? If you just list them off, and then we kind of drill into each of them.
Yeah, of course. And before I do that, just to build on the excellent point you've made, Brendan, at WorkL, we have a free Happy at Work test. Anybody in the world can go and take it. In the last year, 1 million people took the Happy at Work test on WorkL from 193 countries. And what that does is that it gives feedback to the individual on where they can be happier. And I'll talk about the 6 steps in a minute. But also, when they start the test, we say, where do you work? And so it's got data on over 100,000 organizations globally, what the employees feel about working there and how happy they are there. And we do that to try and help people practically find somewhere to work where they're happy. The other thing that we do because of that is we've got the richest data source anywhere in the world of employee sentiment. And so what we can do is we can compare industries, we can compare companies, we can compare countries. And just going back to your point about hard facts, the UK is the bottom of the productivity charts in the G20 and the G7. And we're also bottom in terms of employee happiness. And the stat that you talked about, 80% disengaged, is a huge limiting factor in the UK. I mean, we are really missing out because in other countries, people are getting more from their people. Now, why is that the case? There's a startling statistic from the Chartered Management Institute that found that over 80% of managers had had no formal management training. And so effectively, they were unqualified man managers. They'd got a qualification. They were perhaps accountants or lawyers, but what they'd never had is people training. And so they'd become accidental managers rather than conscious managers. So there's something about training and development, but there's also something about how we think about driving performance in the UK, which is different to, say, America and other countries which score higher. And we have had historically this thought that we employ people to work on our behalf. What we haven't necessarily done is thought we're here as coaches to get the best from the people that work for us. And in the book, what I set out is real examples of real companies where they score higher in terms of their employee happiness for the 6 reasons I'm going to come on to. But also we put in there the commercial opportunity. If you can get staff turnover down from 30% to 25%, there's a saving on the bottom line. If you can get sick absence down from 10% to 8%, there's a saving on the bottom line. And you get productivity improvement. So what the book sets out is the link between people that are happy at work, their behaviors, so whether their flight risk reduces, their potential to go, and what that adds up to. So as you said, there are 6 things that we then measure to work out, are people happy? Are there well-being risk? Are there flight risk? And the 6 things are, number 1, reward and recognition. Do people feel fairly paid? Pay isn't the most important reason that people are either unhappy or happy in a job. It's a hygiene factor. If you pay somebody 5% more than they think they are worth, they don't work any harder. If you pay them 5% less than they think they are worth, it rates away at them all the time. And people look at pay in a relative sense. So people in work don't look at a professional footballer earning £200,000 a week and say, well, that's not fair. I want £200,000. They look at their colleagues and they think, what are my colleagues earning? Am I getting, is what I'm getting fair? So pay is a hygiene factor. It's relative. But when you're looking at pay and recognition is more important. Actually, just saying to somebody, you've done a really good job, has a huge impact on whether they're happy in their jobs. In the UK, we are awful at it. In the UK, on average, we tell somebody once every 2.5 months that they've done something well. We give them positive feedback. However, we give them critical feedback typically twice a week. If you look at countries like America, which score much higher than us, they are much better. And some people say, oh, it's all fake. You've done a great job. Whether it's fake or not, it impacts people. People think, it's great working here. I get positive feedback. So pay, hygiene factor, recognition, real driver of happiness at work. So after that, you're thinking about information sharing.
Well, let's actually just we'll take it because each in turn now, because you've lifted the lid on reward and recognition a little there. So let's just stay on this for a moment and dive into it a little bit further. Pay is a hugely sensitive subject. You've mentioned that it's something where people will feel fairly compensated relative to their colleagues. But a couple of things there. How do they know what their colleagues are earning? And secondly, is there any objective way of us actually saying, here you go, here's what others in the industry are getting paid, and look, we're paying at least 5% above that, and actually, what do other forms of compensation look like in terms of the correlation between paying, let's say, a company-wide bonus or something in relation to the work, or something directly related to somebody who's exemplifying their company's values? Is there something there in relation to the mix of pay that gives us kind of an unfair advantage in terms of, for a small percentage structured like this, we actually see a significant impact in terms of the discretionary effort, which you've mentioned right at the outset?
To a large extent, it depends on the industry, Brendan. And if you're in a sales-driven culture, or you're in, for instance, a caring health culture, bonusing people on health outcomes, if you're a nurse, is not going to work. Bonusing somebody on selling insurance could well say to them, you know what, I want my bonus, I'm going to really go for it. So it depends. I've just finished the first draft of my next book, which comes out in September, and it's called Work Happier. And it's for individuals. So Happy Economics is for managers to help them get the best from their teams. Work Happier is for every individual. And I've got a big section on pay. And I talk about relative pay. I've talked about how you talk to your manager. But ultimately, you need to be able to say to your manager, how does my pay sit relative to my colleagues? What do I need to do to earn more? What training and development can you give me in order for me to achieve more? You can also go to websites, including WorkL, and you can look up what people are earning, see jobs elsewhere. So there's a whole host of things you can do to inform yourself. And then you've got to decide about hours. The thing that I didn't touch on, but if you were to do the free happy at work survey, is I include hours alongside pay, because you've got to make a decision on how much you want to work and how hard you want to work relative to pay. Now, my dad had his own small business. He was a one-man band. He was a wholesaler. He sold biscuits and crisps, and he sold them to schools and he sold them to small shops. He is the happiest, most content person I have ever met. But he didn't worry about money in the sense that it wasn't his driver. He loved spending time at home with his family, and he worked enough hours to earn enough money to do the things that he wanted us to do. We never went away on holidays. We had a camper van. We used to go weekends, but he was happy, and I was happy. I had a really happy childhood. Now, I ran Waitrose, and I have to tell you, it's 7 days a week. On a Saturday night, I was phoning shops. On Sunday, I was reading board meetings and preparing for the week ahead. I would have breakfast meetings, lunch meetings, dinner meetings. I don't think there was a night of the week I'd get home before 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock. And more often than not, I'd be staying away. I'd be traveling the world, visiting suppliers or people we exported to. I made a choice. Now, my remuneration was many multiples my dad's, but I made the choice about what I wanted to do. So fundamental on pay is people being comfortable with how much they want to put in. What balance do they want in their life between earning a lot of money or not? If you're on a commission-based job and selling insurance, frankly, you can work 80 hours a week if you want to, and you can drive that commission up. You've got to think about what makes you happy. So pay is complicated. You've got to think about hours, what you want out, whether the job that you're in is going to give you the level of pay you actually want, whether you enjoy the job and you're going to take a lesser rate of pay. Some of the most happiest people work in not-for-profits. They don't earn a lot, but they have a huge sense of pride that we'll come on to. They feel that they're making a real difference for themselves and society. So pay isn't straightforward. The only thing that I can tell you with any certainty is that pay only ever can mitigate discontent. People will just make a decision about, what, I think I'm paid pretty fairly for where I'm at. And the reality for any employer listening to this, and I'm sure there'll be lots, is that often it's 1% or 2%. And I've always taken the view, what, I'd rather give somebody extra 1 or 2% and they feel happy than argue about it and then, hold back some performance. Now I know that's not always easy, having run businesses and now, running WorkL and scaling it. I know that's not always easy, but I've always found that the better thing to do is to just, if you have to be slightly more on the generous side, because in the long run, you get better returns for it.
On the recognition side, something we do here at Simple Scaling, something that we write about in our own book, Simple Scaling, is the importance of wins of the week. And it's the last communication that we will send as a team to each other on a Friday. It makes you feel wonderful on a Friday and sends you into the weekend in high spirits, regardless of how challenging the week may or may not have been. So we take the time to document and share at least 3 wins from the week aligned to our overall vision, and we celebrate each other for those respective wins. What practically can we do to recognize people more often? You mentioned the Americans are really good at it, and I'm sensing here you shouldn't wait to the annual appraisal to tell somebody they've done a good job. So for those listening, what practically, what are some of the kind of the really kind of low effort, high impact ways of recognizing people?
Yeah, I'm happy to give you a few. I mean, so at WorkL, what we do, similar to you, every Monday we have a team meeting, and at that team meeting, people can nominate somebody who they think has done a great job in the week before, and that's read out publicly in front of the 50-odd people that we've got here. At the end of the week, like exactly the same as you, a newsletter goes out celebrating all the great things that have happened in the business over the week and name-checking people. when I was in Waitrose, I was very, very keen that we tried to give branch managers in our shops and managers in our shops the ability to instantly reward people. So we gave them a stack of postcards and a stack of greetings cards. And we would encourage them, if somebody did something well, to just instantly scribble a note and give them a bottle of wine, or give them a bunch of flowers, or give them a bar of chocolate. And we'd say, look, just do it. What's typical, and I don't want to have a downer on the finance department, but the finance department jumped in very quickly and said, oh, but what about the tax implications? We need to record these as gifts in kind. And so, they were all for, we need to curtail this. Thankfully, in the end, they were persuaded that these were small gifts and personal and didn't need to be done in that way. But we encourage managers to send somebody to the cinema, send somebody to see their favourite football team, and to do it spontaneously, not to have to think about it. So for me, providing a mechanism for people to be spontaneous is great. And then, as you've done, having that formal approach, we recognise great performance on a Monday, we celebrate what we've all achieved on a Friday. They're great ways of recognising, but also just getting managers to understand that saying, well done, great job. They're just the easy things to do, but most people don't think about doing them. But if you can just get that, just think every day, can I say well done 3 times to people today who you think have done a good job? It just encourages them, it nurtures them. That would be the most straightforward piece of advice that I could give.
Yeah, it's a cultural psyche, I find. Growing up in Northern Ireland with quite a militant Irish mother, you were always heavily criticized for what you didn't do and rarely praised for what you did do. Doing well was a kind of an expectation. Missing something, not doing something was always called out. And I think there's something within our psyche, it would seem, that seems to prevent us from actually praising people in the thought that maybe that person's going to come back and ask us for something additional if we continue to praise them for a job well done. Do you find that actually this psyche is embedded in our culture in terms of this reluctance to actually call out a wonderful work?
We're definitely less good at it in the UK. By nature, we're quite cynical. But I think there's a huge contrast. I found increasingly, for me, when I'm writing and talking, I talk about the analogy of what happens in professional sports and what happens in business. So if you think about elite professional sport, you'll have a technical coach who's telling you how you can perform better. And then you'll have some kind of mental coach who's working on your mentality and positivity. And then you'll have somebody who's working on your health and nutrition. And so you have these 3 people every day who are helping you be better, helping you feel more positive about your performance, helping you technically improve, and helping your health improve. And so when I set up WorkL, I came into it with that thought: what can we do to help individuals at work become technically better, to become more positive, and also to think more about their health and well-being, so that physically they're better capable at doing the job. And if I said that to anybody in business about the world of sport, they'd all go, yeah, that's right. Yeah, we know that happens. And you think, well, why doesn't it happen in the world of work? Why in work are we not thinking about looking after our people in terms of, their physical, mental well-being? Why are we not talking to them about their positivity? Why are we not talking to them about technically being better and being positive about that improvement and growing? So for me, bringing that thinking about how do you drive the best from an individual, from an elite athlete into the world of work, will have huge benefits. And I suppose that's consciously and subconsciously what I spent 34 years doing with John Lewis and Waitrose. And the goal now is, how do you do that so that everybody benefits? And what I know, and I said this to you previously, is that company results improve. Profits improve by 20% when you get people performing at that kind of level, when you're just driving extra discretionary effort because people are mentally in a positive space, physically in a positive place, and feel really well trained to actually execute on the job that you've given them.
Yeah, it resonates so strongly. I love the analogy between sport and business, and certainly you would expect, whenever these people are being paid hundreds of thousands of pounds a week in some instances, that we shouldn't be continuing to invest in these people. look at how much they're getting paid. So we expect them to deliver time after time after time, but yet they're brought into these environments and they've got this scaffolding of support, as you've rightly called out, to ensure that they can perform at a consistent level. So that analogy rings true. I think the challenge here, and you've called it out earlier, that in SMEs, and I was guilty of this as we grew and scaled the previous business, because somebody was with you for a period of time, the feeling was, certainly from me anyway, that the way to reward this person was to take this person who was a technical expert, subject matter expert, and give them a manager title, expect them to do the same work that they were doing, and now expect them also to manage these two or three other people without any investment in management training. And I feel that quite a number of SMEs are actually guilty of that. Their intention is honorable in terms of actually wanting to reward this person, recognize them for the time that they've been in the business, but actually what they do often is create a noose around this person's neck. They not only disable what they were doing from a technical perspective, but they in many respects impede them from continuing to develop, and those underneath them if they've had no training. So what I'm hearing is it's really important that you think of yourself as a coach, not a manager, that actually your role is to support those people. And someone I interviewed in one of the earlier seasons of ScaleX Insider, when I posed the question, how many direct reports do you have, said, I don't have any direct reports, but I have 8 direct supports. My role as the leader of this organization is to support those 8 people who come in here every day and want to better themselves for the betterment of our clients and customers. So that analogy really rings true. The second then step towards a happier workplace, you touched on it earlier, information sharing.
Yeah. So if you are going to be happy in your job, you need to be well trained. You need to know everything there is to know about your job to be able to execute it. So part of the information sharing is having the information to do my job well. The second part is about context. It's what's happening in this organization. If there is cost cutting, why is there cost cutting, and what can I do to be part of it? So one of the most powerful things that people can have is knowledge about their job, knowledge about the environment that they're working in, and that allows them to make rational decisions based on knowledge. So of all the 6 things that I think is most important, it's people feeling that they have been trusted with information and they have been properly trained and equipped to do their job. So going back to your example that you gave about the manager being promoted and having to look after 2 people, just because you're technically good at a job does not necessarily mean you're going to be a great manager. Going back to sport, you only have to look at professional football. There are great football players who have not been great managers. It's a different skill. So, as I say, having the knowledge, the information to do your job, and then that gives you the power to execute is hugely important.
So what you're saying is we shouldn't treat our people like mushrooms, then put them in a dark room and feed them with the SHIT. It's sharing, it's treating people as adults, understanding that they're coming on board as a team member to support us as leaders towards a vision which we have also shared. And maybe if you can touch on that, what is the importance here of purpose and vision? The second principle of our 10 principle ScaleX framework is, do you see that as just kind of a little bit abstract, or is it critically important in the context of not only bringing in and attracting great people, but actually retaining them?
No, I think it's critical as a leader. So for me, leadership is all about setting out a vision that engages and involves your people, and then it's about feeding back, and then it's about being continually positive about what you're seeing. So great leaders for me always have the ability to say, look, this is where we're going and this is why we're going there. if you can do that convincingly, so for me at WorkL, what I say to the team is, look, what we're trying to do is to help millions of people all over the world be happier in their jobs. That's what we're trying to do. And that's a great purpose. And we also know that not only is it great for the individual, it's great for the organization, and it's great for economies, because if organizations, companies perform better, then more taxes will be paid and economies can do better. So that's the first thing. That's what we're trying to do, and that's why it's good. The next step, if you're on the same leadership page as me, is about, okay, well, actually, how are we doing? It's taking an interest in you and saying your job in getting us to this place is, I don't know, finding contacts for companies. And so you've got to take an interest. If you don't take an interest as the leader, why should somebody else take an interest? Why should one of your workers have an interest in what they're doing if you're not interested in what they're doing? So how often are you going back? When I ran Waitrose, I had there were 12 or 15 people who at a senior level were critical. Eight were board members, and then the others were not on the board but ran critical jobs. And I had a list of paper and I had their names on it. And every week I would commit myself to talk to each of them for at least 15 minutes, either in a face-to-face or over the phone. I cannot tell you, Brendan, how hard it was for me to talk to all 15 of them for at least 15 minutes every week. But I made myself do it. And sometimes, it would be at all kinds of times, but I would make myself do it. So if you think about who are the core people in your business, and are you really taking an interest in them and what they're doing, making sure that they've got what they need to execute, then you're going to be in a good place to execute on your vision, your purpose. And then the last is you need to be positive. So when in those phone calls you're talking to them and they say, oh yeah, I've got 50 new contacts this week, you're saying, fantastic, that's great. We're well on course to do all the things we need to do. So for me, leadership has always been about having that vision and purpose. We're making a difference here. Whatever it is, you can be making beds and you're helping the world sleep better. You can be in the army and you're defending your country from everything most jobs you're doing something. Even if you're struggling to think of it, you're helping employment in your local community. You're paying taxes so that your local hospital can be better. There's always a purpose that you can find to why you're doing what you're doing. Then it's about, okay, look, here are the KPIs. I'm really interested in you and I'm really interested in you achieving them, constantly going back. And then lastly, it's that positive reinforcement of what people are doing. So that for me is about great leadership and what great leaders do.
I love that. The third way in which we can support people, enable people in creating happier workplaces, of course, is empowerment and empowering those wonderful people with whom we have attracted into our organization because of our communication and our inspiring message around our purpose and our vision. So what does empowerment look like practically?
It means listening to people if they have a point of view, and really genuinely want to listen to what they have to say. It's about then giving them the space to demonstrate to you that they can do their job. Because if you allow them that, if they don't do it, then that's a coaching opportunity. Look, here are some ways that you could improve on what you've just done, and you're making them better. Or if they do it really well, it's an opportunity to say, that's fantastic, well done, you've done a great job. But also it's an opportunity to think about reward. I need to reward this person for a job well done. So it starts playing into all the other elements that we will talk about, the 6 elements. You can reward people, you can recognize people, you can coach people, you can improve their knowledge if you give people the space to do the job. If you're standing over them every day and saying, no, don't do that, do this, don't do that, you might as well do it yourself. I mean, you have to question, why am I employing this person? So things will go wrong, and what you have to learn is a degree of tolerance that some things will go wrong that you really wish hadn't gone wrong. And if somebody repeatedly gets something wrong, then it's a different kind of conversation. But allowing people the space to do a job, to either get it wrong and you can coach them, or to get it right and you can praise them, is incredibly powerful, and it makes people happy at work. They either feel they're being developed or they feel they're being rewarded.
Yeah, again, we're very much on the same page here, Mark. the the one of the most profound fears or pronounced fears that I see within leaders who have a desire to scale is that fear of letting go and the limiting belief that no one will do the job as well as they do it. So they get caught really stuck in the bowels of the business in many respects because everything then tends to go through them. They're micromanaging, and in many respects, it's self-affirming to them that this business can't exist without them, and they must be involved in everything, and no one can make decisions without coming through me. Is because they actually haven't coached people on the art of decision making, the practice, the discipline of decision making. Practically, how have you previously operationalized your vision? I mean, something that we implement, certainly in the businesses that we coach, are objectives and key results. So these are ways of ensuring that every 90 days we're clear about what the objective is, aligned to 1-year goals, aligned to a 3-year vivid vision, aligned to a 10-year moonshot. And that methodology, devised or certainly defined by John Doerr in his wonderful book, Measure What Matters, is something we find very, very potent. That serves to actually create a level of accountability, which again, I hear from leaders, people don't take accountability in this organization because again, they're not empowered to do so. Have what do you typically use in terms of operationalizing the vision, seeding that accountability, and giving yourself comfort to let go?
So I'd agree with you that it starts with strategy. What are our KPIs for this year? Where are we heading? So that's all about vision and purpose. We're here, we want to be here. This is how we're going to do it, and everybody buys into that. I think that the problem I found more historically is an individual, as you alluded to, that wants control and feels that by micromanaging they're solving all the problems. And I'll give you a real life example and how I dealt with it as quickly as I can. So I went to visit one of our business units, a production unit, when I was running Waitrose. And I went inside and I talked to various managers and I picked things up with them, and I asked them, what would you do to improve performance? And they would say, we need to do X or we need to do Y. And I'd say, well, that's great. Why don't you do it? And they'd say, well, we put a request in for money to do that to the finance director, but it's not been approved. And it was a constant story when I went around. It was lots of people had lots of great ideas of what to do, but it was all waiting for sign off for the finance director. So I went at the end of the visit to see the finance director. And his desk was piled high with papers and requests. And I just said, oh, tell me what's going on. And he said, you know what, I absolutely pride myself that we don't spend 1 penny in this business that I haven't thoroughly thought about. I look at everything, I sign everything off and da-di-da. And I said to him, well, I really admire your thoroughness, but the team is saying to me there's lots that they think they could get on with quite quickly, but they're waiting on you for signature. And it's not that you don't have the capital, you're effectively sitting on it. So he became very defensive, as I kind of expected, really. So I said to him, and this was a unit out in the country, and I said to him, tell me how you feel when you drive into work and you're stuck behind a tractor on a country lane and you're desperate to get to the office and do something, you can't get past it. And he said, well, it's really frustrating. So I said, well, that's how your managers feel. There's stuff they want to do. For them, it's very obvious, but you don't quite rightly the detail of what they're doing, but you're holding back the whole operation. So I said to him, perhaps a better way to do this is to say to the managers, you want to spend this amount of money, what results are you expecting from it? And they tell you what results they're expecting from it. And as a consequence of that, you give them the money, but you actually say to them, the thing I'm most interested in is whether you achieve this return, whether it delivers what you say it's going to deliver. So rather than spending all that time debating for myself whether this is a good or bad thing to do, I actually give you a budget. I trust you to prioritize what you think is most important. And then we have a monthly meeting to see how that's gone. So for me, it's that mindset about what are you there to do? Are you there to coach and develop? Or are you there to actually make the decision for everybody on every minute detail? And I went back to that business unit a year later, and it was immeasurably better. The finance director felt that they were doing a more important job, which was about training and coaching managers about financial competence, capital allocation, return on investment, rather than that person feeling that they had to sign off, a minuscule bit of spending in one area or another. So that for me illustrates the difference between empowering and practically empowering, and how some people need to be encouraged to go on that journey.
Oh, it's a brilliant illustration. We need to support our people from being stuck behind the tractors on the potholed laneway and help them get onto the freeway, to get onto the autobahn. So number four then, well-being.
Yeah, well, if people are happy in their job, they feel that their manager and the organization cares for their mental, physical, and financial well-being. So if I am not well, I would expect and hope my manager would say, look, you're not well. Why are you in work? Or you're not well. What are we going to do about it? Or, mentally you're struggling. What are you going to do about it? And that requires people to have the confidence in their manager, which will come onto it, to be able to have those conversations, but also the manager being empathetic. So to be happy at work, you have to feel that your manager and that organization genuinely has your well-being at heart. So far we've got reward and recognition, information sharing, empowerment, and caring for my well-being.
A sense of pride. What do you mean by that?
Well, I think this plays beautifully, Brendan, into your purpose piece. This is feeling that whatever you're doing is making a difference. I feel proud to do this job. I feel proud to work for this organization. I would recommend any of my friends and family to work here. What I am doing is making a difference. I understand my part in this huge machine. If you're in a huge machine, if you're in a small business, I understand my part in growing this business to be something much bigger. So it's all about having a pride in your job and a pride in your organization.
Is there anything else that we can do to imbue that sense of pride in people? So connecting them, and everyone will come to this through their own lens, and connect a sense of meaning. If we're communicating a kind of an organizational purpose and encourage people to create a connection between their role and the organizational purpose, is there anything that you would encourage those SME leaders listening where they have an organizational purpose, and certainly there is huge benefit in having that organizational purpose, but actually helping people, helping individuals create a sense of meaning for them in relation to the organizational purpose?
Yeah, of course. There are three areas where a business leader can create a sense of pride. The first is in the individual and the job that they do. So I am being developed in this job to be really good. So you take pride in your personal performance. So pride in personal performance is one. And then there is pride in the organization. This organization is a great organization because of what it's doing for this town, society. And then it is pride in what this organization does for a society. So, do you sponsor the local football team? Do you give an individual, a few hours off every month to go and work in a local charity? Do you support a local charity? So that people work there say, our business is great. We support the local X charity, or we support the local kids football team, or whatever it is. And these things don't cost a lot of money. They're about time. But it's thinking about those three triggers. How can I make somebody feel proud as an individual of what they're doing? That's often about, it's either their development, as I said, or it's about you are an absolute pivotal part to this business's success. If you didn't do bookkeeping as well as you did, I can tell you now we'd be in dire straits. So it's feeling proud about your job and your development. The second is, this is a great business. What we do in this business is we create employment, we pay taxes, we make the best beds in wherever, and people have better night's sleep because of our efforts. And the last is, what do we do for society? We volunteer time, we support the local football club. There's loads that you can be proud about because of what we do as a company. So if you go to those three, you'll always find things that you can think about how proud you can make your people feel and how proud you will feel of your business.
Yeah, again, just so practical. And we hosted the wonderful Owen Eastwood, the author of the incredible book Belonging, last week actually at a workshop for our ScaleX tribe, for ScaleX community. And something that's very, very powerful, very easy for people, for leaders to say, but I've never heard it said before, is that simple line: you belong here. Just looking somebody in the eyes and telling them that they belong, because innately, genetically, from an evolutionary perspective, we all want to belong. There's safety in a tribe. So just being told and it being affirmed that actually you belong here, I feel is very powerful, and just undergirds everything that you've so eloquently described there in terms of actually imbuing that sense of pride. So finally, job satisfaction.
Yeah, job satisfaction is about two things that drive your happiness. The first is career development, particularly important for younger people in the workforce, but I believe that I am being developed. I'm growing as a person, and this company has helped me do that. And then the one which is critical is the relationship you have with your manager, which is the major determinant of whether you're happy at work or not. So if I was to ask a simple question of somebody on a scale of 1 to 10, how happy are you with your manager? But whatever answer they give me, I know how happy they are in their job. I can tell you from the 21 questions in the free WorkL Happy to Work survey where they're going to score, depending on whether they say 5 or whether they say 8 or whether they say 10. And that one question is highly correlated to how happy you are. So those people who are most happy in their jobs think that they have, or believe that they have, a really strong relationship with their manager, and that they believe their manager is getting the best from them. So it comes back to this point about the criticality of really good man management.
I invited you right at the outset to provide a mini masterclass on what it is to create a happier workplace. The last hour is absolutely flown. Before we move into our close, it would be remiss of me not to take the opportunity, given the fact that you're the former Minister of State for Trade and Investment, and well done you. Of course, I should have introduced you as Lord Mark Price. It's the very first time we've had a Lord on the show. So really well done. And this is recognition for you of your championing and cheerleading of business and SMEs. Given that, Mark, what would you say, against the backdrop, certainly in the UK, of some challenging conditions, the most recent being an increase in employers' national insurance, Brexit, we've kind of navigated through, COVID. Kind of what's your rallying call for SMEs who, let's say, are feeling a little bit fatigued as a result of governments both here and, we've listeners right across the globe. There's a new president in the US. What would you say to SME leaders who have listened over the last hour?
Well, the last few years have been incredibly difficult. I've gone from running a massive corporate Waitrose with 73,000 people to setting up from scratch a tech HR business. And so I know it's hard work. It started with me, and then there was me and somebody else, and then me and somebody else and somebody else. And, COVID was really seriously hard work. And what I know is that SMEs are resilient and tenacious, and they battle on until they get across the line. And those are not things really that government are much help with. You've either got them or you haven't got them. In terms of SME business, the thing that we're very good at in the UK, funnily enough, is SMEs exporting. We're very good with SMEs, and we're very good with very large companies. Medium-sized companies we're less good on. They tend to be quite well-developed family businesses, and they don't take the risk. But the great thing about SMEs is they're risk takers, and I would just encourage them to keep taking risk, being resilient. Wherever you can export, Bizarrely, I think the UK will find itself in quite a good position with Trump. I think he will apply tariffs to Europe, and I think that he will apply tariffs elsewhere, but I don't think he'll apply them to the UK because our goods on deficit are positive in the USA's favour. So I think that gives us an opportunity to become a global exporter again. I think that relationships with the EU will improve, and I think it'll be easier to export there. So if you're growing as an SME, I would think big, think outside the UK, and then I wish everybody, every bit of luck going. I know personally what it's like to to wake up at night in a cold sweat about how you pay the wage bill and how you grow the business and da-di-da-di-da. And I've got nothing but admiration for SMEs. When I was running Waitrose, and when obviously we met with loads of SMEs who supplied us and farmers, so I had an appreciation then. But until you do the job yourself, you kind of don't know how hard people are working to build businesses. And the truth is, they are the lifeblood of the UK. 95% of all businesses in the UK are SMEs, as they are globally, and it's those people putting that energy in that drives economies. So if this government has got any sense, it will think long and hard about measures that support SMEs. And certainly in my time in the House of Lords, I'll be doing that. I'm off there this afternoon. There's a debate about the national insurance contribution increases, and I'll be arguing in favour of an amendment that phases them in rather than hitting people in one go. So while I can, I will be supporting SMEs and businesses get the very best support they can from government.
Oh, good on you. We're absolutely rooting for you, Mark, and in the interest of holding you back for a few minutes before you head to your meeting, I have a tradition to close the show with this question. You've segued into it beautifully. Given your incredible career, both in government, in large companies, now in an SME startup, what 3 timeless takeaways would you share with our listeners?
I don't know if I've got 3 because they're highly personal, but I will share one personal one, which I hope makes up for the 3. And that goes back to my time in John Lewis. And I started as a graduate trainee and I worked through, and I can remember saying to my now wife, if I become general manager of the John Lewis in Southampton, I'll be really happy. I'll have made it. And then when I get the next job, I said the same. And I can remember saying to her, look, when I become the managing director of a department store, that's it. I am going to be so happy. And I became managing director of the John Lewis in High Wycombe, and I was 29. And I think at the time I was probably the youngest to ever make that grade in the business. And I went in and I sat behind the desk, and boy, did I feel good. I felt great. And I thought, I've made it. I've got the company car. I'm sitting at the big desk. I'm running this fantastic business. Turnover, I think, was 50, 60 million at the time, employing 500 people, 600 people. I thought, this is great. Do you know what? 2 days later, I was already thinking about what am I going to do next? And the reality is, for me, and I suspect everybody else, and this goes back to the Greek philosophers, material things, winning, gives you short-term happiness and pleasure. The thing that actually gives you the long-term pleasure is altruism, is having a purpose, a reason for being. And it is all about finding that in your career and your life, that what you're doing is working with great people, helping great people, supporting great people be better, helping a business be stronger. It's that you get contentment from. And it took me, quite a few years to work that out. So my one lesson is you'll get the greatest pleasure, not from growing your business and selling it for 20 million, and then thinking that, that beach holiday and that yacht is going to be it for you. What you'll look back on is building a great team, helping people find their first jobs, helping people grow and develop, providing a product to the market that the market really likes and wants. That's what will give you the greatest satisfaction. So the quicker that you get to understand that, the more you become content and the happier you are with your contribution. The money's great, don't get me wrong. For all of you out there that are striving for that 20 million sale, go for it. It'll be fantastic. And I tell you, you will be very, very happy, but it's not the thing that will give you the greatest pleasure over the long term.
Hear, hear. Wise advice indeed. Mark, I am going to let you go. You're writing another book. Well done to you. I look forward to reading that. You mentioned September of this year, 2025. Hopefully we get you back on whenever you've released that. And the scale up journey you are on with WorkL. If people want to find out more about WorkL and connect with you, how best can they reach you?
If you go to WorkL, that you'll find me there.
Okay, brilliant. Well, look,
so it's WorkL, WORKL.com.
Brilliant. What's the L for? I was curious actually as I was reading this.
So originally it was so that it could be work life or work leisure or work. It could kind of convert into lots of things. So it's marketing.
Brilliant. Good on you.
What it's worth.
Well, look, we will put a link with your permission to your free assessment in the show notes and your contact details. Mark, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on today. Thank you for sharing your lived experience, for giving us a masterclass on what it is to enable happier workplaces and ultimately more productive, higher performing workplaces in the context of scaling. Your wisdom in closing is profound. I wish you every success with everything you're doing. I look forward to staying in touch, and I especially am rooting for you this afternoon in the House of Lords. Well done, Lord Mark Price. It's been a pleasure to have you on today. Thank you.
Pleasure to talk to you, Brendan. Thank you very much.